I heard the click of expensive heels approaching my cubicle before I saw her. Angela from HR with that practiced, sympathetic smile. "Victor, do you have a moment? Margaret would like to see you upstairs." My stomach dropped. After 22 years at Pinnacle Technologies, I knew what that meant. No one gets called to the CEO's office on a Friday afternoon for good news. My name is Victor Kendall, 51 years old, Senior Infrastructure Architect at Pinnacle Technologies in Seattle. Or at least I was until 4:30 p.m. that Friday when Margaret Chen, flanked by Angela and our new CTO Jason Brooks, informed me my position was being eliminated in the company's strategic realignment. "You've been a valuable member of the team, Victor," Margaret said without making eye contact, sliding a manila folder across her sleek desk. "The severance package is generous. 2-month salary, extended health benefits through the quarter. Jason, 15 years my junior with an MBA and exactly 7 months of experience at Pinnacle, added, the infrastructure team is moving in a different direction. Cloud-native architecture, DevOps integration. We need fresh perspectives. Fresh perspectives. A polite way of saying I was too old, too expensive, and not trendy enough with the latest buzzwords. Never mind that I had built Pinnacle's entire server infrastructure from the ground up when they were still a startup operating out of a converted warehouse. Never mind that I had personally designed the redundant systems that kept them running through 3 major power outages while competitors went dark. Never mind the 22 years of nights and weekends sacrificed to keep their systems running. I said nothing, just nodded once, took the folder, and walked out. No dramatic speech, no pleading. That's not who I am. I've always been the quiet one, the reliable one working behind the scenes while others took credit for my solutions. In the elevator down to my floor, Angela attempted reassurance. Your contributions have been appreciated, Victor. This is just business, you understand. I looked at her, this woman half my age who'd been with the company for maybe 3 years. I understand completely, I said, and turned my attention to the changing floor numbers. Back at my desk, I began packing methodically. Family photo of my wife Diana and our college-age twins. The small potted cactus that had survived 15 years under fluorescent lighting. The coffee mug my daughter had made in ceramics class when she was 12. 2 decades of my life in a single cardboard box. Across the open office, I could see my colleagues glancing my way, then quickly looking down at their screens. News travels fast. Most were young developers I'd helped train or bail out of critical failures over the years. Good kids, but they had no idea what was built into our systems or how the architecture actually worked beneath all their shiny front-end code. Melissa from the development team stopped by, her face tight with concern. Victor, I just heard. This is complete BS after everything you've done here. I shrugged slightly. Companies change direction. But without any warning, after all these years? Her voice was rising, drawing attention. It's fine, I said quietly. Really, it wasn't fine, but I wasn't going to make a scene. As I was leaving, Jason watched from the glass-walled conference room, not even bothering to hide his surveillance. No goodbye, no handshake, just making sure I actually left. What he couldn't possibly know was that I carried something far more valuable than the cardboard box in my hands. Knowledge. 22 years of intimate knowledge about every system, every server, every back-end solution I'd custom-built for Pinnacle's specific needs. Documentation that existed only in my head. I sat in my car in the parking garage, looking back at the gleaming high-rise where I'd spent half my waking life. The electronic badge I'd just surrendered had been replaced 14 times over the years as the technology evolved. I'd outlasted 3 CEOs, 5 CTOs, and countless reorgs and pivots. Until today, I started the engine and drove home to our modest 3-bedroom in Bellevue. They had no idea what was coming. Tuesday would be interesting. I'd been with Pinnacle since they were just 2 floors in a business park. Started when my son Adam was in elementary school. Now he was finishing his master's in computer science. My daughter Emma was in her 3rd year of pre-med. The company grew, and I grew with it, turning down offers from competitors because loyalty meant something to me. Diana used to joke that I was married to those servers. She wasn't entirely wrong. I knew every system, every workaround, every custom solution to problems the executives didn't even know existed. The infrastructure I'd built had survived 2 acquisitions, countless executive visions, and a dozen technology pivots. Jason became my boss 8 months ago, fresh from a mid-tier consulting firm with big ideas about digital transformation and cloud migration. Young, cocky, with perfectly styled hair and custom suits, the type who used phrases like paradigm shift and synergistic opportunities without a trace of irony. At first, I tried to help him understand our architecture, the complexity hidden under years of growth and adaptation. "We need to future-proof our stack," he'd say in meetings, looking right past me. 3 months ago, he brought in consultants from Apex Digital, expensive suits with shiny presentations about infrastructure modernization. They'd huddle in conference rooms, speaking in hushed tones whenever I walked by. 2 months ago, I noticed my access permissions being quietly modified. Nothing obvious, just gradual restrictions to administrative controls I'd created myself. I could have protested, but instead, I watched and documented. "You seem distant lately," Diana said one night as we sat on the deck, watching the sunset over Lake Washington. "Everything okay at work?" I nodded, sipping my beer. "Just changes, nothing I haven't seen before." But these changes felt different. I was being systematically sidelined. Meetings about system upgrades no longer included me. Younger team members were assigned to projects I would normally handle. Then I found it, a company-wide memo about modernization initiatives that had never been shared with me. It outlined a complete restructuring of the IT infrastructure under new leadership. My position wasn't just diminished, it had been eliminated on paper weeks ago. That same day, while running a routine security scan, one of those background tasks no one else bothered with anymore, I noticed unusual patterns in our project management software. Projects I'd been told were postponed due to budget constraints were actually proceeding, but under different internal codes with approved budgets 30% higher than original estimates. The managers assigned, Jason Brooks and 2 consultants from Apex. I didn't say anything, just noted it, copied the records, and continued watching. Sometimes the quiet man in the server room sees everything precisely because everyone thinks he sees nothing. The weekend after my termination was surreal. No alarm woke me Saturday morning. No emergency calls about server issues, no reason to rush. Diana found me sitting at the kitchen island staring at my coffee. "Maybe this is a blessing in disguise," she said, squeezing my shoulder. "You've given that company everything for 2 decades. Maybe it's time for something new." I nodded but said nothing. My mind was elsewhere, processing, planning. By Sunday night, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to fight to get my job back. That wasn't the point, but I also wasn't going to let them dismantle everything I'd built without understanding exactly what they were dismantling. Monday morning, I sat in my home office, examining data I'd been legally required to maintain as part of our disaster recovery protocol. Company policy explicitly required off-site backups of critical system architecture documentation I'd created and maintained for years. The legal team had signed off on these protocols after a ransomware scare 5 years ago, then promptly forgotten about them. I wasn't doing anything wrong. These were copies I was explicitly authorized to maintain. What was interesting wasn't that I had them. It was what they revealed when examined as a whole, rather than as isolated systems. The pattern was clear. For the past 6 months, Jason had been systematically replacing internal systems with solutions from Apex Digital, at costs averaging 40% above industry standard. More concerning, these systems were being deployed without proper security integration with our existing architecture. Potential vulnerability points were being created throughout the infrastructure. But the real revelation came when I cross-referenced these changes with Jason's personnel file, which I had access to as his former direct supervisor. Before joining Pinnacle, Jason had been a junior partner at Kramer and Associates, the parent company of Apex Digital. His LinkedIn profile conveniently omitted this connection. I leaned back in my chair, feeling something shift inside me. Not anger exactly. Something colder, more focused. For 22 years, I'd solved problems, fixed systems, protected data. I'd been the reliable one, the steady presence who never caused waves. And they had discarded me like obsolete hardware. My phone buzzed with a text from Eric, a junior admin I'd mentored for the past 3 years. Total chaos this morning. Production servers went down during migration. Jason blaming the legacy architecture. Nobody knows how to fix it. Miss you already. I set the phone down without responding. The pieces all fit now. Jason wasn't just competent. He was deliberately steering Pinnacle toward expensive solutions from his former company, creating dependencies that would lock them into Apex's ecosystem for years to come. And they had fired the one person who could have prevented it. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to Margaret Chen, then stopped, finger hovering over the send button. Too direct, too easily dismissed as the bitter accusations of a fired employee. I needed precision, a way to expose what was happening that couldn't be ignored or covered up. I deleted the draft and started making plans. Tuesday morning, I sat in my car across the street from Pinnacle's headquarters, watching employees stream through the revolving doors. In the passenger seat was my laptop, connected to an administrative account that should have been deactivated during my exit process but wasn't. Sloppy IT transition. Exactly what I would have expected from Jason's team. At exactly 9:15 a.m., I executed my first move, an automated system assessment I'd designed years ago for disaster recovery scenarios. The script would scan all systems, identify critical vulnerabilities, and generate a comprehensive report. By 9:30, my phone was ringing. Jason Brooks. I let it go to voicemail. Victor, we're experiencing some system irregularities that may be related to automated processes you implemented. Please call me back immediately. I didn't respond. At 10:30, another call, this time from Angela in HR. Mr. Kendall, we've noticed some unusual system activity that appears to originate from your credentials. This potentially violates your separation agreement. Please cease all remote access immediately. Interesting. I hadn't signed any separation agreement. At noon, I drove to a coffee shop, set up my laptop, and reviewed the automated report. The results were worse than I'd anticipated. The migration Jason had initiated had created 23 critical security vulnerabilities, including unprotected access to customer data and financial systems. I downloaded the report, disconnected from Pinnacle's systems, and drove to the office of Samantha Warner, an attorney I'd consulted during Pinnacle's second acquisition, when they were restructuring employee stock options. This is concerning, she said, reviewing the technical documentation. If customer data is exposed, they'd have notification obligations under Washington's data breach laws. I'm not interested in suing them, I explained. I just want to protect myself while ensuring they understand the vulnerability they've created. She nodded slowly. Let me draft a letter, professional, factual, documenting your findings and the circumstances of your termination. We'll make it clear you're acting as a responsible security professional, not a disgruntled ex-employee. By 3 p.m., my phone showed 6 missed calls. Jason, Angela, Margaret, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize, and, surprisingly, 1 from board, Chairman Robert Ives, a man I'd met exactly twice in my 22 years at Pinnacle. At 4 p.m., as I was leaving Samantha's office, my personal email chimed with a message from Margaret Chen. Victor, we need to discuss some concerning system behavior. It appears several critical processes are experiencing failures that may be related to recent changes. Our team is struggling to identify the root causes. I'm sure this is just a coincidence and not retaliatory action on your part. Please call me at your earliest convenience to discuss transitional support. We're prepared to offer a consulting rate of $250 an hour for your assistance. I showed the email to Samantha, who raised an eyebrow. They're worried about liability. Notice she's careful not to directly accuse you of anything, while simultaneously offering to pay you to fix their problem. I nodded. The systems aren't failing because of anything I did. They're failing because Jason removed critical components without understanding the dependencies. Do you want to help them? She asked. I considered the question. Not yet. Wednesday morning, I received Samantha's letter via email for review. It was perfect. Professional, factual, with just enough technical detail to establish my expertise without becoming unreadable to non-technical executives. It outlined my 22-year history with Pinnacle, the circumstances of my termination, the security vulnerabilities created by recent system changes, the potential regulatory and business implications, my willingness to provide transitional consulting at $500 hour with a 20-hour minimum engagement. The letter would go to Margaret Chen, Robert Ives, and the General Counsel's office. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Robert Ives himself. Victor, he began without preamble, we have a situation. The entire customer management system is down. Jason says it's related to legacy architecture issues, but nobody seems to understand how to fix it. We're losing roughly $50,000 in transactions every hour. That's unfortunate, I replied calmly. Look, I'll be direct. We need your help. Whatever happened with your position, we can discuss that later. Right now, we need your expertise. My consulting rate is $500 an hour, 20-hour minimum paid up front, I said. Silence then. That's highway robbery, Victor. No, Mr. Ives. Highway robbery is eliminating a loyal employee's position after 22 years to hire your new CTO's friends at inflated rates. $500 an hour is the market rate for emergency infrastructure rescue with my level of expertise. Take it. Or leave it. Another pause. I'll have legal draw up a consulting agreement. Can you be here in an hour? I'll be there in 2 hours after I receive the signed agreement and payment confirmation. After hanging up, I called Samantha to review the hastily drafted consulting agreement that arrived in my inbox 15 minutes later. She suggested a few modifications, which I returned to Pinnacle's legal team. By noon, I was walking through Pinnacle's lobby for the first time since my termination. The security guard did a double take, then quickly printed me a visitor badge. Good to see you, Mr. Kendall, he said with newfound respect. The elevator ride to the executive floor was silent. I'd never had reason to visit this level before. Now I was expected in the main conference room. Margaret Chen, Robert Ives, Jason Brooks, and 2 people I assumed were from legal waited around the polished table. Jason looked pale, eyes darting nervously. Victor, Margaret began. Thank you for coming in on such short notice. We're experiencing critical system failures that... I'm aware, I interrupted calmly. I've reviewed the automated reports. You have multiple cascading failures stemming from improper system dependencies during migration. Customer data is currently vulnerable, and you're losing transaction capability by the minute. Based on the timestamp of the first failure, you've already lost approximately $600,000 in business. The room fell silent. Robert Ives leaned forward. Can you fix it? Yes, but first I need to understand exactly what happened. I turned to Jason. Walk me through the migration plan you implemented. Jason shifted uncomfortably. We followed. Standard cloud migration protocols for enterprise systems. No. I cut him off. You didn't. Standard protocols would have included dependency mapping and staged migration. You removed core components without understanding what relied on them. What I need to know is why. Robert Ives cleared his throat. Victor, we just need the systems restored. We can discuss process issues later. I remained silent, waiting. The executives exchanged glances. Margaret finally spoke. How long will it take to fix? Depends on how badly the architecture has been compromised. Minimum 10 hours, possibly up to my contracted 20. Then you should get started, she said. I shook my head. Not yet. First, I want to understand exactly what's happening with Apex Digital. The room temperature seemed to drop. Jason's face went from pale to ashen. What about Apex? Robert asked sharply. The company Jason worked for before joining Pinnacle, though he conveniently omitted that from his employment history. The same company that's now charging you premium rates for substandard solutions. Robert's head snapped toward Jason. Is this true? I worked with them briefly as a consultant, Jason stammered. It's not a direct conflict. I opened my laptop and turned it toward the executives. These are the contracts approved. Over the past 6 months, Apex is charging an average of 40% above market rate for every component. More concerning, the architecture they're implementing creates vendor lock-in that will cost Pinnacle millions to unravel if you ever want to. Change providers. Margaret stared at the screen, her expression hardening. How did you access these contracts? I didn't access anything improperly. These records were part of my job when I worked here. The question isn't how I know, it's why you didn't. The next 4 hours were a blur of technical work. I methodically rebuilt the connections Jason had severed, restored critical dependencies, and stabilized the core systems. By 6 p.m., customer-facing operations were restored, though the back-end infrastructure would need days of additional work. As I was preparing to leave, Robert Ives asked me to join him in his office. I've been on the phone with our general counsel all afternoon, he said without preamble. Jason has been terminated, effective immediately. We're launching a full audit of all Apex contracts. I nodded but said nothing. The board has asked me to offer you a position, he continued. Chief Information Officer, reporting directly to me. Substantial compensation increase, full executive benefits. I considered his offer. The vindication was satisfying, but returning to Pinnacle meant walking back into a place that had discarded me after 2 decades of service. I'll need time to consider it, I said finally. He looked surprised. We're prepared to be very generous. Victor, it's not about money. I need to decide if this is where I want to be. That evening, I sat on our deck with Diana, watching the sunset over Lake Washington, explaining everything that had happened. So they fired the new guy, and now they want you back with a promotion and raise, she summarized. Talk about karma. They're desperate, I replied. They've realized how vulnerable they are. She studied me carefully. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I have options now. Pinnacle isn't the only company that needs someone with my skills. The next morning, I received calls from 3 competing firms. Word had spread about Pinnacle's systems collapse and my subsequent rescue operation. All 3 offered senior positions with compensation packages well above what I'd been making. I took meetings with each of them, evaluating not just the offers but the company cultures. Were they places that valued institutional knowledge, or were they like Pinnacle, always chasing the newest trend? Meanwhile, Pinnacle's board kept increasing. Their offer, adding stock options, performance bonuses, even a seat on the executive committee. A week after the system collapse, I made my decision. I met with Robert Ives in a coffee shop halfway between his office and my home. I've considered your offer, I began. And we're prepared to increase it, he interjected quickly. The board is authorized. I held up my hand. It's not about the money, Robert. It's about respect. For 22 years, I built and maintained systems that kept Pinnacle running. My team and I solved problems, prevented disasters, created solutions. And when someone with an MBA and a flashy presentation came along, you discarded that experience without a second thought. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. Mistakes were made, Victor. We're trying to correct them. Here's my counteroffer, I said, sliding a folder across the table. I'll come back as Chief Technology Officer with full autonomy over infrastructure decisions. My team reports directly to me, not to some committee. I select the vendors we work with based on technical merit, not relationships. And I want written acknowledgement that the intellectual property I developed while at Pinnacle, the custom solutions, the architecture designs, belong to me personally. He opened the folder, scanning the document inside. This is unusual. So is firing the person who built your entire technology infrastructure without a transition plan. He studied me for a long moment. You could have let us crash and burn. Why didn't you? Because I built those systems, I said simply. They matter to me. The question is, do they matter to you enough to accept my terms? 3 days later, I walked back into Pinnacle Technologies with a new title, a corner office, and a clear understanding with the board. The company announced a strategic realignment that placed me in charge of all technology operations. Margaret Chen personally introduced me to the staff as the backbone of Pinnacle's technological success. Within 6 months, I had rebuilt my team, terminated the overpriced Apex contracts, and implemented the proper cloud migration that should have happened in the first place. The company saved $3.2 million in the first year alone. On the anniversary of my termination, I sat in my new office looking out at the Seattle skyline. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Eric, the junior admin I'd mentored, now my deputy infrastructure director. "The board approved your revised security budget," he said, handing me a tablet with the confirmation. "No questions? No revisions?" I nodded, taking the tablet. "Things change." "Not everything," Eric replied with a slight smile. "You're still the same Victor who taught me how to troubleshoot server clusters my first month here." After he left, I stood at the window reflecting on the past year. Being fired had been the best thing that could have happened, not because I got my job back with a promotion, but because it forced Pinnacle to recognize the value of what I'd built over 2 decades. Some people make noise. Some people make headlines. And some, like me, quietly build the systems that everything else depends on. The quiet ones in the server room might be invisible until we're gone, but once we are, the absence is impossible to ignore. I picked up my phone and dialed Diana. "Dinner at Canlis tonight?" I suggested. "We have something to celebrate." "The anniversary of the day they fired you?" she asked, amusement in her voice. "No," I replied. "The anniversary of the day they realized they couldn't succeed without me."